from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on AgDay, the latest Rural Main Street Index raising concerns about trade tensions, plus the challenges facing dairy. In agribusiness, the cost of tariffs on soybeans.
Their crushers today are screaming just as loudly as the U.S. farmer not to have that tariff.
Missy Bauer teaches on planting depth on Farm Journal College TV, and weather, wildfires, and the kindness of community on Farm Sense.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clint Griffiths. A newly released index measuring confidence of the rural economy took a beating as bankers expressed concern about trade tensions. Overall, the Rural Main Street Index from Creighton University remaining above growth neutral, indicating an upward trend with improving economic growth. But RMI also showing bankers in the 10-state district have concerns about unresolved trade matters. The confidence index within the RMI sank from 58 last month to 50 this month. Creighton economic Dr. Ernie Goss says an unresolved North American free trade agreement and rising trade tensions with China are significant concerns. More than 3/4 of banker and bank CEOs reported that export markets were very important to their local economy. Almost 1/3 of bankers support the abolition of NAFTA and undertaking a new agreement, but 40% support the current pact. On the matter of NAFTA negotiations, the trade ministers leading the NAFTA talks are meeting this week in Washington. They hope to achieve a deal in principle within weeks. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer met Thursday with his counterparts from Canada and Mexico. Now, according to Bloomberg News, there are signs that there could be a deal that leaves the fine print to further talks between bureaucrats. But some big gaps remain, including auto production and agriculture, say the Bloomberg report. Dairy farmers across the country are struggling to survive. That is, milk prices aren't even at break-even levels for some farmers. U.S. Department of Ag's data showing in Wisconsin, the state lost 430 dairy herds last year alone, and so far this year, herds have declined by an additional 150. The latest Farm Journal Milk Intelligence Survey proving 2018 could also be a challenge. It's a survey of dairy producers with 500 or more cows. The survey finding that 37% of producers say they'll only survive one more year under current milk prices. 35% of producers say they can only last 2 to 3 more years. It's low prices and hefty milk supplies causing pain in dairy farms across the country, with some without a home to ship their milk. But as Tyne Morgan reports, that's not stopping them from fighting for their future.
For Johnson County, Indiana farmer Joe Kelsey,
how's things going? Everything going well today?
It's not just another day.
Cows milking well?
He's continuing to pump milk while a cloud of uncertainty hangs over his farm.
Right now, it's a bit difficult to be a dairy farmer.
His job just became even more difficult. He found out in February from Dean Foods that he has 90 days to find a new home for his milk.
It was a little bit surprising.
He not only received a letter in the mail, but he's also been in constant contact with the company he's done business with for more than 25 years.
Our conversations with both field staff and top leadership have been, they're very frustrated that this is the reality that they're dealing with.
Kelsey is one of 27 producers in Indiana and one of more than 80 across the country who received a letter from Dean Foods. In the letter, Dean calling it a difficult decision, but one based on 2 main factors. The first is the new Walmart milk processing plant coming online near Fort Wayne in May, and the second is the dairy market flooded with just too much milk.
We're caught at a time where there's just too much milk, more than what the market can bear at this moment.
Mike North of Commodity Risk Management Group says producers ramped up production as overall demand drew higher.
Demand grew, especially at the world level, and our producers made the investment, put their best foot forward, and they really rose to the occasion.
While demand climbs with appetites for items like cheese and butter growing, consumers continue to drink less milk, and that's adding to the oversupply pain. Dean Foods telling Farm Journal that milk consumption has dropped 11 gallons per person since 1975. At the same time, the U.S. dairy industry is producing 350 million more gallons of milk each year, a combination that's proving to be lethal to the industry.
A lot of dairy producers' cost of production right now is exceeding what they're getting in their milk check.
But eliminating supply isn't an easy fix.
It takes 2 years to get an animal up to size to start milking, and then once you're rolling on that process, it's really hard to turn the spigot and adjust that spigot to the exact needs of the market.
That's why when the letter from Dean's came in the mail, he was overcome with concern.
The cows are making milk every day. We're 3 times a day milking, and we're a trailer load every other day.
Instead of playing the blame game, Kelsey is committed on the hunt for a new buyer.
Initial responses are, milk supplies are pretty abundant at the moment.
And as debts rise, Lang says it's a harsh reality that's setting in.
How many dollars they've lost or how much additional debt that they've had to take on, and are looking at those 2018 budgets and saying, boy, we're really going to be putting our business or our equity in a position that we don't feel comfortable with.
It's that dilemma Kelsey's facing today.
If we're negative margin, and we have been for a bit, how much more equity are we willing to invest to wait for these prices to improve? And that's going to be the question that I think our family and many other families are going to have those difficult conversations around kitchen tables as they come to the grips with that reality of that those price changes are real.
As an eternal optimist, he knows he also has to balance it with being a realist. And the reality is it's not only his family, but employees whose livelihoods pivot on the success of this dairy.
It's really a family. It's extended family. I mean, the folks that help us on the farm are absolutely critical to what we do every day.
And as one door closes, he's hopeful another door will open as he works to keep his family's legacy alive.
All right, thanks, Ty. A stressful time for farmers being recognized in Washington on Thursday. Senators Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin and Joni Ernst of Iowa introducing the Farmers First Act. It's seeking $50 million over 5 years to provide the ag community with critical mental health support and resources. Now, a recent CDC report found that ag workers have a higher suicide rate than other occupations. The Farmers First Act looks to establish helplines, provide suicide prevention training, create support groups, and more. Now, most of that would be handled through states and nonprofits. The senators hope to include the measure in a new farm bill. That heavy-duty late-season snowstorm in the upper Midwest chased away dryness in Wisconsin. The Drought Monitor map from Thursday showing just 3% of the state is dry. That's a 44-point improvement from the previous week. Green Bay measuring 24 inches of snow over the weekend. That's the biggest April snowstorm on record for the city. Let's turn now to Mike Hoffman for today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. A farmer from Jackson County, Iowa posted a fieldwork update on AgWeb. It was short and sweet. Not much activity to report. The end. From central Indiana, a farmer in Howard County took advantage of a few days of warm weather last week by planting 4 acres of sweet corn. But then a cold front came through and brought cold and some snow. Did he start too soon? The farmer says check back in July. And take a look at the wind speed forecast. A little bit in the northeast, but mainly on the eastern edge of the Rockies. You can kind of see those windy areas as we start today. Kind of expands into parts of New Mexico and West Texas as we head through the afternoon. Now the winds really do calm down through most of the country by tomorrow morning. That system in the southern plains not nearly as strong as recent storms. We do turn windy in Texas and parts of the northern plains later in the day tomorrow. We'll have your forecast coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
Ever wake up wondering what does today's weather have in store? Well, with weather updates, it delivers the local forecast right to your cell phone each morning to make preparing for the day easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Up next, calculating the impact of Chinese tariffs and what it could mean to U.S. soybean prices. Numbers you won't want to miss. That's coming up in analysis. And later, whether you're planting yet or not, hitting a target depth is important to a uniform stand. We'll get a lesson on planting depth today on Farm Journal College TV.
With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor corn herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
Agribusiness, a mixed bag for markets this week. Let's see how Thursday's trade finished up. For that, we head to the floor of the CME in Chicago.
I want to start looking at this corn market. Although May is going off the board here in the next week and a half, we're going to touch on that because we have May options going off the board tomorrow afternoon. I think that's kind of influencing price here. Now, when we look at option expiration, we look at the strikes with the most open interest. It looks like 380 is going to be a magnet for that May contract to end the week. So I think the funds aren't going to be in any sort of a hurry to do any liquidation without a crop in the ground just yet, and I think that offers support going forward. Now, touching on the soybeans, kind of a mixed bag here. We've retreated off of some of these levels, filled a gap from April 6th here this morning. I think that filling of the gap represents great value as far as risk reward goes on the first test. If we can stabilize to end the week, I think that puts us in good shape going into next week, and we could see the market work a little bit higher, and the cattle markets are bleeding a little bit lower. I think a lot of this is probably some squaring up and some jockeying back and forth from the funds to shake out the week longs going into tomorrow's cattle on feed report, which a lot of market participants are very much looking forward to. That should give us a good picture going into next week and for the remainder of the month. It's been Oliver Slope with Blue Line Futures from the floor of the CME.
Mark Veit with International Agribusiness Group joining us here at the Agribusiness Desk today. Mark, as we look at the soybean market and all the talk about tariffs between the U.S. and China, how does that pencil out as we start to look at the kind of the chain of impact from this decision and this back and forth?
Yeah, I think there's two potential outcomes. One is a little bit negative, and if you go through the numbers, our belief is that you impact 20 million tons of soybean trade.
Okay.
And it ends up with a 30-cent wider soybean basis in the U.S.
Okay.
That the farmer gets the cost from a wider basis. It doesn't impact futures.
Yeah. What about as far as demand? Do you see this shifting a big portion of world demand? You know, we also have people saying, well, if they buy it from South America, then we've got to sell it somewhere else. Do you see that?
Yes, I think I don't think it changes demand. I don't think it changes the Chinese demand. Their crushers today are screaming just as loudly as the U.S. farmer not to have that tariff. They do not want to have that tariff. There's a short-term opportunity for them to buy more beans and maybe even export a little meal. So margins are good. They'd like to import more. But I don't think it changes demand. We would shift more Brazilian beans go to China. We take more European business. It all offsets. I mean, we overlap that business anyway. It's pretty easy to switch.
Yeah. As we look out a little bit into the future, these tariffs go into play. Do you see that long-term impacting the acreage, the decision to plant soybeans here in the U.S.?
Well, I think as a relationship to profitability, certainly you would think that we would switch more to corn. There is a possibility that there's a positive outcome to this.
Okay.
That we get to the negotiating table and China says, as a concession, because soybeans are a tough piece for them, that they say, we'll buy 40 million tons of U.S. soybeans if you give us concessions somewhere else. Or we buy a little more ethanol from the U.S., which they're going to buy anyway.
Yeah.
And that's a concession, and this ends up being a positive. So,
well,
that would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. So many moving pieces. Thank you so much, Mark. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
To talk to Mark, give him a call at 248-715-9222 or send him an email at mfight@iaggroup.com. Ag Day, brought to you by new Delaro fungicide for corn and soybeans. Achieve personal best yields.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman looking at the drought monitor. And Mike, some of these areas will see a little bit of rain, at least one system.
Yeah, a weak system, but it does have a decent amount of moisture with it. So hopefully it's at least a little bit of a help. Not going to really take away the drought. We go back 4 weeks and you can see it was already a pretty large area from the Four Corner region into northwest Texas, western Oklahoma, and southwestern Kansas. But as we go through the last 4 weeks, you can see how that has expanded off to the northeast a little bit into Kansas and parts of the Missouri Valley, also the southeastern parts of the country. As you can see, though, a large chunk of the country and most of the Corn Belt not looking too bad, and it continues to get better for the Dakotas, northeastern Montana. That's taking a while. It always takes a while to get rid of a widespread bad drought like that. High pressure dominating central Canada, most of the central portions of this country as well. You can see the cold front moving slowly through Florida, some scattered showers and thunderstorms down there today. Storm system coming across Colorado will spread some rain then into areas east of the Rockies. You can see there's not a lot of moisture with this, but it does put down some decent amounts anyway, parts of Texas, Oklahoma into Kansas. Also a system coming into the Pacific Northwest. That'll just be a weak cold front kind of coming through the northern Rockies by later in the day tomorrow. Precipitation estimates over the next 36 hours, you can see our model is putting down some areas with an inch in the panhandle of Oklahoma, panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, and also on up into parts of Nebraska and western Kansas as well. So I'm not sure it's going to be a widespread area, but nonetheless, it could help no matter what. And you can see some snow amounts, mainly the higher elevations of Colorado and northern New Mexico. Temperatures on the cool side across most areas east of the Rockies. Still warm in Florida and South Texas. Heading through tonight then, you can see low temperatures across the northern tier of states. Lots of 30s there, 50s and 60s by the time you get to the Gulf of Mexico. And then tomorrow afternoon, we start to see the warmer air trying to come back northward. Lots of 70s down south. 40s and 50s across a good chunk of the Corn Belt. Taking a look at the jet stream then, you can see it's an active weather pattern. Each of these little troughs here, a little in some cases almost a cutoff trough, moving very slowly across the country, but we continue to see that the Arctic air is kind of cut off now, so we should see a general warming trend overall across most of the lower 48. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Heading to Williston, North Dakota, partly sunny and milder today. High temperature up to 62 degrees. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, partly sunny and very comfortable. High of 72. And finally, Elmira, New York, mostly cloudy, breezy and cold, high 43.
Up next, it's our weekly trip to college. Missy Bauer will help us check planning depth on Farm Journal College TV. And later, an update from those Oklahoma wildfires. For a good part of the country, there's still time to get your planner set up, fortunately or unfortunately. Field agronomist Missy Bauer shows us how to check planting depth on Farm Journal College TV.
Well, the first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and dig up the plant. Once we get it dug up, we want to clean off the soil from the root system here, and then we want to focus in on looking at what we call the mesocotyl. This mesocotyl can be found if we find where the old seed is, and then follow it up. It actually attaches here to the crown of the plant. And if we go ahead and measure the length of this mesocotyl and add 3/4 of an inch to it, that's going to be our planting depth. So there's a couple ways of doing it. We can do it while it's still attached to the plant here, and we can take our tape and lay it right at the 3/4 line at the base of this crown. This crown is where all these crown roots are going to come out of. So if I put that right at the 3/4 line and then measure down here, this one was planted to the bottom of the seed here right at 2 inches. Another way I can do it is actually snap the mesocotyls off, as I have in these examples I have laying here, and then just measure the actual length of the mesocotyl itself and add 3/4 of an inch to it. So this one's at 1.5 inches, plus 3/4 would be 2¼ inches deep. This one here is at 1 inch, plus 3/4 would be 1.75 inches deep. So that's the way at any point in time, if you're wondering what the planting depth difference is, maybe from this plant to another plant, if you had emergence issues, you can check that anytime throughout the growing season.
All right, an update on wildfires and how you can help next on Farm Sense.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
As much as farmers try to mitigate the impact of weather, there's really only so much that we can do. We've seen that on full display just in the last week, from 25 inches of snow to sleet, hail, tornadoes, and ice storms and flooding. It's been a crazy weather week, and it's brutally clear we still don't control the sky. Now, lack of rainfall and scorching spring temperatures are again igniting heartache in the heartland. Over the past week, wildfires have burned roughly 400,000 acres, caused 2 deaths, burned fencing, feed, livestock, and homes. and the immediate danger is now being replaced by the longer-term stress of finding feed and fencing. Friends and fellow producers from across the country are already asking how they can help. Oklahoma Extension's coordinating relief efforts. If you're interested, feel free to call one of the numbers on the screen. Now, New Mexico, Kansas, and Texas have also seen fires. Don't forget them either. Last year, we witnessed 1.5 million acres go up in flames, and American agriculture stepped in and helped tremendously. I have no doubt we'll see a similar outpouring of support. In these uncertain economic times, one thing American ag can count on is each other. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in and spent part of your day with us. For Mike Hoffman and all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great but safe day in farm country.